karaoke. Well, this one got me into trouble today, but it's not a new one. It's with me all the time. Education. My take. My experience and my take. And as fair as I can be, I would say I have already covered the row I had in 10th grade? Must be something like 10th grade. Anyway, I was 15 or 16 with my social studies teacher, who I adored. And because I had decided, at 15, I had decided that I was not going to go to university. And it hadn't really been talked about, but probably because I was such a reclusive child, I hadn't really gone into it. I had immersed myself really for 3 years by that point in deep, probably extremely inappropriate art. Nijinsky, I'd seen a poster of Nijinsky at the Harvard Coop, and in L'après-midi d'un faune, excuse my pronunciation, I'd seen this photograph and I was just like, wow. He's doing the faune, he's bending backwards and standing up. And I was amazed by that. And I was a huge fan of, probably because of the Clockwork Orange, the book. Don't talk to me about the movie. The book. The Ninth Symphony, and then the Pastoral, the Sixth, I think it is, and the Fifth, of course, the Third, Vincent van Gogh, Woody Guthrie, I was remembering the other day, all of Steinbeck, bits of Hemingway, Jack Kerouac was coming. I don't think I'd quite gotten there at 15, but it was coming. Kicked in by Salinger, etc., etc. So I was in a kind of heaven, artistic heaven. And, all the stuff with the girls was happening and all that kind of thing. And so I missed the boat. I have a missing gene. I decided that I was not going to go to university, mostly because I didn't like school. I didn't like the nature of it. I didn't respond very well to it. Like I say, most of my obsessions and things were private and solitary, and I would have been happy to talk about this stuff in school, talk about the world, Karl Marx. The Black Panthers were big, and I'd read Soul on Ice and stuff. I would have been but that's not what happened at school. Come on, it's not what happened. And, there was a pedagogue, etc. And it wasn't even much of an objection to that, but I just couldn't see. I was not interested in going off to some other place, and I think I'd already left home in some fashion, so there was never that. And anyway, so I had just gone a different path than was expected, and parents were very angry. And it isn't really until relatively recently, because I caucused with college graduates for most of my life. You know what I mean? I hung out with them, and the system's quite different in England, so that by the time I was at drama school, which was some years after I left high school, many of those people had also just gone to high school. And the justification or the reasoning for high school was, as I said, I'd been exposed to all this marvelous American art, hugely significant personalities, Malcolm X, Dr. King, just James Baldwin took me over for a bit. Anyway, so I sort of done all that, and I just I wasn't interested to go and to compete, and and ultimately my glorious social studies teacher had told me, he said, it's for your salary, it raises you're going to make more money. And I said, well, Nancy, that's not going to fly. Anyway, so and I let all that go, and went on with my existence, which later on did involve the vocational trade art of acting, which was kind of just a nudge in a certain direction and a guidance over certain impulses, empathies and sympathies one naturally has. And at drama school, drama center, they sort of went, okay, that's terrible and that's quite marvelous. So that's basically what that was. No tests, really. So in a sense, I was not brought up into a world of competition. That may be one ringing of the bell. My problem with it all is that I think that after high school, after the rudimentaries, after the awakening, after the introduction to the marvels of literature, Euclid, Aristotle, all that sort of stuff, which happened for me in high school. And I did know how to read before I went to kindergarten. Lucky me. More stories. But the problem is that I think what happens after the traumas of being a young adolescent, and if you're not a screwed up adolescent, you're not right. That's what adolescence is for. After that, it seemed to me that the rest of the next 4 years, the undergraduate, was about conditioning, indoctrination. Not at all in a bad way, because I think it's created the people who run our world. The CEOs and the politicians and stuff like that. So at this remove, all I posed to anybody, posed it to my brother, and he's very resistant, and I totally understand why. I really do understand why. My thing is, how are we doing with these people in charge? Which isn't to say that you want to become a lawyer out of high school. I understand all that. I'm not that sold on lawyers as a breed anyway, but I'm not sure that I can look at the evidence of the world. The world is run by people who, in one fashion or another, were highly educated. The English system, the American system, they're all lawyers. And I think something happens. For one thing, I think happens is that because society has decided that this is the great progressor of the human condition, the university education, that the university educated have got huge blind spots, because they haven't, because of its sort of, on the one hand, rather monastic characteristic of the ideal of the university, that one goes away at the age of 18 or whatever it is. One's supposed to withdraw in some fashion, or you're supposed to hang out and do the frat thing and be rebellious and drunk and all the rest of it. I mean, at 17, I had no reason to rebel. I had no one to rebel against. Anyway, so I think that that's the mistake, is that not only do we think, or we led to believe, we the masses are led to believe that Keir Starmer has a brain, or Joe Biden had one. The evidence is thin on the ground, but we're led to believe that. We're led to, if you go to apply for most jobs nowadays, and I was right at the tail end of where you could come out of high school and do almost anything. You were, everything was an apprenticeship in some fashion, and you could move in quite exalted circles with just a high school education. And I think one of the big obstacles today, people say, oh, populism, 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 without acknowledging that populism has an antonym, it has an opposite. It's called elitism. And there's something inherently elitist about the institution of university. It needn't have been that way, but it is that way. Shake it or bake it. That's how it is. And it's the worst ism of all of them. It's the mother of all the isms. Sexism, racism, etc. is this bloody elitism. And on the evidence, the fact that we don't have any discourse, there's no mechanism apart from trotting out every 2 years down to the local school to vote. There's no relationship between me and the power structure. I'm lucky. I don't need them. God knows so many people need them, and they need them for very, very, very good reasons. The inequality, resource inequality in this country and in Britain is chronic. Something has to redress it. You can't redress it with your glorious capitalism. It doesn't work. It's blatantly obvious it doesn't work. And a whole bunch of educated people have written a whole bunch of books that we have got to get through, get past, justifying this system. So I look out my window at this point in my life, and I go, I'm looking at a system created by a bunch of people we have been led to believe we're brilliant, and it's a disaster. It's a disaster. Wars, rumors of wars, inequalities up the wazoo. And it's interesting because what triggered the discussion was a little clip of Harry Belafonte talking about having dinner with Dr. King. I think it was like 5 days before he was murdered, and saying that everything, from Belafonte's point of view, everything was going very, very well. King had made some massive progress in various directions, and he still seemed agitated. He said, "Why are you agitated?" And he said, "I think I've made a mistake. I think that I've tried to bring I have insisted that we all have more access to the American thing, participate in it." And he said, and I think that was a mistake because I think it's diseased. And that would have been 1968. And in 1968 I was 12. So a few years later, I would have agreed with him. And I would have been told by a whole bunch of PhDs that, no, this is the great empire. We are the best, and we're the hope, and we're the this, and we're the that. And even then, it was, looking at it, you're going, no, it's not, guys. It's just not. So what does that mean? Well, I think what it means is that stop overly valuing education unless you acknowledge the fact that it leads to $100 plates. Goodness does not hide behind its gates. And even the President of the United States. Just have a rational look at it and start listening to people who do not come out of that mill. Really. I mean, a couple of years ago, I was visiting a glorious friend in Phoenix, Arizona, and they were having some plumbing done. And this plumber came out, big, powerful Tolkien-type man with a huge black beard and stuff like that. And he was fixing something with the water, and we started talking about the aquifers. And this guy just went off. He knew everything. He knew about the water supply and the perilous low water supply in Arizona. He just knew all this stuff. Now, I'm not saying he probably voted for Trump. I don't know. But I'm not, he may have been a PhD from Berkeley. I don't know. He was a plumber, right? And I thought, if he isn't, and I had another encounter with a plumber earlier that year who was quite similar. And I did think, who knew? You know, he wouldn't come on to a talk show with Dick Cavett and have people talk for 5 minutes about where he graduated from and his PhDs and where he taught and the number of books that he'd written and all that sort of stuff. He was just a guy who I was just interested in, and this rather marvelous mind came out. And I think, I thought then, and I think now, I think we need to be saying to people who, it's not so much that they haven't had a voice. That really does become our own individual responsibility. But have we asked for it? Have we asked for it? Or in our obsession with our pallid democracy, our obsession with the notion of leadership, and we know where leaders come from in this country, and they're a catastrophe. Look at it. You know, and people keep saying, well, we've got to have leaders. And I'm going, why? Try listening to 10 people instead of waiting for one to show up to turn your crank. That's authoritarian. Your need of leaders is authoritarian. Bring it yourself. There'll be more on this, but that's what I got.